Welcome to the Bitcoin Zodiac, the podcast that explores the intersection of finance and astrology, where we use a combination of spirituality and logic to help us connect the dots in the markets as well as in life. Hosted by Corinne, Claire, and Alexandra, who come from a diverse background, bringing with them a wealth of knowledge and experience in the realms of astrology, cryptocurrency, spirituality, yoga philosophy, day trading, and of course, Bitcoin. In each episode, we explore a different aspect of the economics of the markets, from following Bitcoin to more complex topics like blockchain governance and decentralized finance. But we don't just stop there. We also examine and discuss the astrological implications of these topics, exploring the different zodiac signs, the houses, the moon phases, and how they might approach financial decision-making and investment strategies. Join us on this journey as we explore the intersection of these two worlds that are often thought to be at odds with one another, finance and astrology. Whether you're a seasoned crypto investor, a day trader, or just starting to dip your toes into the world of Bitcoin and blockchain, the Bitcoin Zodiac is a podcast for you. So sit back, relax, maybe take some notes, and come expand your consciousness with us through the world of the financial markets with an astrological lens.
Episode 1. Here we are.
Amazing, amazing. Good morning, ladies. Good evening for you, ladies.
Hello. Good evening. How we doing?
Really good. I'm so excited for this. We've been talking about this for so long. I can't believe that we're finally doing it. It's going to be so fun. I'm really excited to share this.
It manifested beautifully.
It did. And I love that we are constantly talking about these things and we're like, we need to get this information out to the world. Like, we can't continue just keeping this between the three of us. So I'm so excited that we're finally here and doing this. And I have the biggest smile on my face. I'm like a little kid jumping up and down.
I know, I love it. I feel like we're just recording our own like personal calls and we're just going to share that. I don't think we need to change the format. I think we just really flow with it anyway. So it's going to be really interesting.
Exactly. Yay. Well, let's start with what we kind of had planned today to discuss, which is really about introducing this whole world so that when we continue with episodes, it's all going to make sense. Because I feel like a lot of people are like, wait a second, the Bitcoin Zodiac. So crypto and like horoscopes and astrology. So I think we need to make that clear. And that's kind of the intention of this session today.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So why don't we kick off and we just introduce ourselves and sort of talk about how we became interested in crypto astrology.
Yes. So, Alex, would you like to start?
Sure. So how did I become interested in crypto astrology? It's such an interesting question because it didn't start that way. Like, I didn't just like pique interest to this specific topic. It was an evolution of an understanding, right? So I've used astrology my entire life. Like, astrology was introduced to me at a really young age, and it was just always there, like another way to have self-understanding. And I think because it was always there, I was able to relate to it and use it like, oh, I'm an Aquarius. My moon is this. The full moon is in this. The new moon is in this sign. But I didn't really like dive into it as much as I feel like you guys have till more recently in my life. So I've always been interested in the economics of the world. You know, just always being kind of skeptical of how things are run and why things are run and who decides what information goes out there, where's the money going. And as I found you know, this education platform and found crypto, I like the idea of crypto first because it was different, and anything that is different than the norm, my natural Aquarius self is like, ooh.
I was just
So
about
that's
to
Same.
say,
I
like,
was gonna say so Aquarius.
classic Aquarius.
this whole podcast, if I can say, is just classic Aquarius, and then like I'll come
Very
back to
much.
what we're saying. Yeah, so like when I learned about crypto, I was like, oh my gosh, amazing. Like people are going to start to take back their power. And I'm all for it. And as I learned about that, and I learned about how, well, while people are taking back their power and their sovereignty and thinking outside of the box with money, it's also really manipulated still because that's the dual nature of the world that we live in. And when I found Corinne, I believe it was Corinne who introduced the idea of the moon phases and Bitcoin to me. I think we had just met and we were sitting in downtown Delray having coffee. And I think she showed me I don't know if you showed me a chart because I don't know if you had started mapping it out yet or if that was the time. But at one point you showed me a chart and I was like, that makes a lot of freaking sense because full moons, my whole life, I remember being very like energetic and like almost high in a ecstatic type of way.
Like
And
feeling like a little bit like a lunatic.
yeah, exactly. And so when you introduced that idea to me, I was like, okay, there's got to be something to this. And here we are.
Yeah.
I love that. And maybe I'll just piggyback directly off of that.
Yeah.
Because
Please do.
it's so funny that because my story is just so different to that. Like I feel like I was raised, not so much by my family, but like by society in such a like masculine, logic, hardworking, like don't tell me about meditation and spirituality, just work harder kind of way, right? But I feel like at the same time, I always had in the back of my heart, in the back of my mind, like, I believe in a higher power. I do believe in the law of attraction. But it was just so much logic. Like I studied medicine. And then when I first got introduced to the world of crypto, for me, it was like money until I started on my entrepreneurial journey, on my trading journey, that I feel like trading started exposing me in so many different aspects of my life. And trading and entrepreneurship definitely pushed me to start to look within. And that's kind of like where then I started to get into spirituality and self, et cetera, et cetera. And then I was on the charts and I heard somebody in our trading community say the moons align with Bitcoin. And I was like, what? Like, tell me more. I get onto TradingView, I look at the moon phases, and I'm like, Bitcoin follows the moons. Like, I need to start looking at this. And then that just started opening up a whole world for me. And I started diving into the astrology, and I was like, duh, of course I'm a Leo. Like, even just look at my hair, like the personality, the traits, the features, they're like there, like I'm a Leo. And then I just started piecing all of these pieces together. And now I love following the astrology and looking at it like this macro. And at the same time, I feel like it's helped me get more aligned with the mission of what crypto is. Because crypto is so much more beyond money. Bitcoin is literally power to the people. Decentralization is literally this revolution that is going to set so many of us free, in my personal opinion. So I want to start diving into stuff, but I would be getting ahead of myself. But that's kind of like how I started. And I am so happy to be in this like feminine flow now and stepped away from that masculinity and in this feminine flow of being able to look at the markets, look at the astrology, piece the pieces together. And so grateful for my God for giving me these tools that have just embarked me on this incredible mission. And Claire, I know you're very passionate about decentralization.
100%. And I think it's I think it's really interesting because I guess my sort of story is like the opposite of that, I suppose, because I founded the Hadassah Collective, and I'm the host of the Hadassah Collective podcast, which is very much in line with spirituality and exploring those aspects of ourselves. And I think anyone that knows me is sort of very used to me being like very at home, more at home with the moon and the stars that I am on planet Earth, for sure. And I think, when I sort of share like my interest in Bitcoin, people are like, what, where has this come from? It's so, outside of my comfort zone, my personality, I think. So the astrology side of things, whereas I think that these two things are like my worlds combined, to be honest. And this podcast is really like my two worlds colliding. Because I think how I sort of looked into financial astrology is I was already really aware of the of astrology as it pertains to our lives, and I don't necessarily look to it as a future predictor, but I really am hyper aware of what's going on in the cosmos and how the energies and how that's affecting us and our emotions. And again, I came through the moon cycles of looking at Bitcoin and just realizing that, like, wow, it really does map out the ebb and flow of energy, from each new moon down to the full moon and back up again. And so I found that really interesting. But I think the moment that I think I even said to Corinne, I'm like, we really need to look more into this, was when I was aware that the eclipses were happening last year. And I noticed almost to the day, each eclipse, the eclipse in May was the lunar collapse. The eclipse in November was the FTX collapse. And I was just like, you can't make this up. And so there definitely was a correlation. And I started looking a lot more deeply into it. And I think in the broader macro sense, I think that financial astrology is really interesting, really pertinent. And one of the things that I do want to say to people who are kind of new to this, who think it's probably a bit weird, maybe a bit airy-fairy, is that, even if astrology doesn't necessarily resonate with you, if you are interested in financial markets, the ones that move the markets do follow astrology. So even if you're not somebody that integrates astrology or observes astrology in your own life, it does give you a bit of an insight into the markets. It gives you a bit of a bird's eye view. I sort of see it as the macro on top of the macro, yes. In those terms. So it's been a really interesting exploration. And yeah, I do love the astrology that we're moving into right now is really, really interesting in terms of Bitcoin, decentralization, innovation, technology. So it's really exciting times that we're living in. And I'm looking forward to exploring it with you ladies. It's super fun.
And I'm so obsessed with something that you just said, because the people that control the markets,
yeah,
are definitely onto astrology. Like, there can only be so many coincidences. And I always think back straight away to JP Morgan. JP Morgan, who I think everybody that knows anything about finance or the economical space knows who JP Morgan is. He literally used to use astrology first, until he then stepped into the industrial ages, and he had to bring things to society, and society and investors were never going to be like, yeah, the moon's going to do this, so let me invest. No, instead they needed to hear, hey, technical analysis, here are the numbers, this is how much % return you're going to get. So he literally had to shift out of astrology into numbers because of the industrial ages, and that's the way that logic and people thought. So if JP Morgan was somebody that used astrology and has such a key role still to this day in the economics of everything, it's there, it's back there. I feel like it's hidden information that's just being forgotten. And I'm here to bring it all back out with you ladies.
Bring it out. Let's bring it out.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's an element for sure of that it's hidden. And I think there's also been an element of discrediting, of sort of different spiritual work. And we have talked about this many times before, but obviously this is our first episode of the podcast, and we're moving into these times where these sort of more intuitive ways of viewing not just the financial markets, but life in general is becoming more and more important, and being able to sort of align with that side of your intuition is actually gaining more and more credibility, I think. So let's bring all of that to the forefront and all of that to the surface.
I mean, we're in the age of Aquarius, like that explains so much. And if like not even there's different systems that explain like what's happening in the world. Like we are going through this shift of consciousness that is from we've talked about this before, but less dense. We're going from a place of density to a place of more lightness. And Aquarius is an air sign, but in a different system. Even in like right now we're just coming out of like Kali Yuga. So in the Vedas, even in like Vedic astrology, Vedic philosophy, we are becoming energetically like smoother, softer, thinner. Like if you think about like just a couple hundred years ago, people weren't even allowed to smile in photos in America. You know what I mean? Like emotion was such a taboo thing. But it's like we are literally connected to the planets by how energy and how gravity works. Like it actually is a very masculine physical science. So it's just that dual nature. But yeah, being in that age of Aquarius where we are now, it speaks numbers to that. I mean, I don't know if I'm talking in circles right now, but allowing that the intuition to come out, the divine feminine to come out, not only in just women, but in, all beings, the intuition, the inner knowing, the less technical. Yeah. I'll let someone else pick up.
No, I mean, I love the balance of both. Like, I think that that's sort of been, because we've had such an imbalance with patriarchal society, masculine energy, we've had such an imbalance that we've almost gone very far into elevating the feminine, which has been great. Like it's been necessary. But I think also that, we have that masculine energy and that feminine energy within all of us. And so it's really being able to balance that and recognize what's needed for that time, that particular time. And I think it's really interesting, speaking to something Corinne said as well, in terms of technical analysis, shifting into technical analysis. When I look at Bitcoin's astrology chart, to me, it's the same, it's the same experience almost as looking at as a trading view chart. It's really a very similar thing to me. And that's kind of how I look at it, that it's exploring both, because I think there's elements of intuition when you're looking at a trading view chart, and also elements of technicality when you're looking at an astrology chart as well. So I think both, it's dipping into both when necessary, and it's having that intuition and knowing when to do that, when to operate in both of those spheres. That's the kind of gift of our age.
Exactly.
Yes, go on.
I was just going to say, touching on that, the two comparisons of the chart, I think that is so true, because when we first get introduced into something like crypto and trading or investing, and we get presented these trading view charts, it's such I call it this linear thinking, this step by step, this is look for these confirmations to then be able to enter your trade. It's like ABC 1, 2, 3. But, and I think we all know it here, as you step more and more into your trading, you step more and more into your intuition.
Yeah.
There is such a big psychological and spiritual aspect to it. And some of the best traders that I know have spoken to me about, you know what, sometimes it's just a feeling and you just know whether it's going to go the way that you expect it or that you have predicted it to or not. And now when we are putting astrology into this, and for, those people that are listening, we're not just looking at, oh, okay, where is the moon today? But we are looking at natal charts. We are looking at birth charts. And it's important to also underline here, when we talk about astrology, we're not talking about horoscopes. When we talk about astrology, like horoscopes are kind of like that commercialized astrology that's like, oh, let me see what's gonna happen to a Leo today, right? Like that's not how that works. But when we talk about astrology, we're talking about time, place, date of birth. Yes, you can do that with people, but you can also do that with crypto projects, with businesses, stocks. So we're actually going in and looking at, in particular, what's happening with Bitcoin. Bitcoin that was born on the 3rd of January 2009. Why? Because its first transaction on the blockchain was on the 3rd of January 2009. And from there, we're able to determine when was Bitcoin born. And that's how we then start to actually apply more information than just what we're looking at a trading view chart, but also looking at Bitcoin's specific astrology. To kind of nip that one in the bud, because I feel like people are like, so we're just going to be talking about Leo and Aquariuses.
Yeah. And the more kind of that we, I never, as I said, I was always really aware of the astrology, but I never really overlaid it with Bitcoin. I never really looked at it. I think when I heard the term financial astrology, it definitely piqued my interest, but I never really took it that seriously. But because I was kind of aware of the astrology that was going on, I could notice the patterns of events taking place. And I thought, okay, we really need to look at this. And this is something that we do take really seriously. It's not like just something very airy-fairy. It is something that we look into in a lot of detail. And I think it's also interesting to note that when we're aware of the general astrology of what, how the planets are transiting for the world, what we are doing with this podcast is we're overlaying that with Bitcoin's natal chart, because we want to sort of look at how that impacts Bitcoin, and Bitcoin really rules the rest of the crypto market. So if I'm probably the most Bitcoin maxi on this in our group, and I'm not even a pure Bitcoin maxi. But even if you're interested in other crypto projects, Bitcoin really kind of rules the roost at the moment and really guides the other projects. But we sort of want to look at how these sort of different transits align with Bitcoin's natal chart, because it gives us an idea of how Bitcoin's going to react, what kind of opposition Bitcoin may face in terms of regulations and things like that. And we can glean all of that from the astrology charts, from Bitcoin's natal chart. And also, when we're looking, what I found especially recently is we could be coming into some very hectic collective astrology, but those kind of events could actually be really positive for Bitcoin moving forward. So it's really interesting to have that overlay and have that perspective.
Yeah, and to kind of also piece that together for those people that maybe are a little bit more in a linear thinking, or even call it logic thinking, because I call this astrology side of things a bit more like a non-linear thing.
Absolutely.
Whereas you still need that linear. Think about it like this. We have technical analysis where we use kind of like, we have different time frames. You can zoom in all the way to the 1 minute, even seconds if you really want. And obviously, technical analysis personally is still a big part of what it is that I use. But then I take a step back before that and I look at, call it number 2, the fundamental analysis. You can look at the new different things that are going on. We could even already start looking at a bit of the psychology of what is the sentiment overall in the news. Go and look at the fear and greed index, what's going on, and then take it one more step back, the third step, which you could even use as the first step, right? Which is the astrological analysis. Like, I think maybe Claire, you said it before, it's like the macro of the macro. It's like overall view of what's going on, what's everybody feeling, what maybe do we predict that is about to happen in the world. Like, we said it before, eclipses is something key to use. And one last thing to even think about this, and as we start stepping into a little bit more detail, is we do use the signs, the planets, so zodiac signs, the planets, the houses and their placements to potentially forecast movements or to forecast potential movements in the markets. And I personally, hopefully this is all making sense and not overwhelming people straight away, but I personally start to look at the moons. You move through the moons and then use the planets as a backdrop to what's going on.
Alex, did you want to have a little chat about the moon cycles and talk about how you use those moon cycles?
Yes. So in general, I mean, I don't know if everyone who's listening knows, like, what are the moon phases? I mean, we can go outside and we can see how through different days of the month the moon shifts, and like, what does that really mean? So if you don't know, the moon gets its light from the sun. Here's a little bit of a science lesson for you, but the moon gets its light from the sun, and that's pretty cool. And like, so basically there's 8 moon phases. There's the new moon, there's the waxing crescent, the first quarter, waxing gibbous, full moon, waning gibbous, the last or the third quarter moon, and the waning crescent. So the new moon is when, and I'm going to talk about it from science and spirituality too. The new moon is when there's no moon in the sky. The moon is literally blocked. And spiritually, new moons are great for creating new ideas, new plans. Things are at it's like an all-time high almost, if you will, in our lives, to say, like, let's reflect, what was the past month? Okay, cool. What am I creating? Like, what are you creating? What are you bringing in? And it's that new blank slate energy, like there's no moon in the sky. And that's how I've treated new moons my entire life. New moons, personally, I find are more difficult for me to like go through and cope through. For some reason, there's always some like great lesson for me to learn. And if you think about it and how we move and evolve as humans, when we learn lessons, we're doing a lot of gaining. We're gaining knowledge. We're expanding our perception. And what I find with trading and using the moons is when there's a new moon, the markets are spiked. They're at a high. I mean, I trade gold mostly, and gold even follows the moon phases as well. Same with Bitcoin. Obviously, we've went through that already. So, and as the new moon starts to grow and you start to see the little slivers, that's when you can. I'm sorry, my dog just entered. The dog just entered the room. When the new moon starts, Nala says hi. I find price, maybe price action starts to shift. Maybe it starts to go down a little bit. And as I prepare for the full moon, it's now a process. It was just a process of building and tapping into the new ideas and the new goals. And as I break and as that energy shifts and the moon starts to appear and get bigger and get bigger, it's like, okay, another process of shedding. And I feel like when we build up to the full moon, it's the ultimate shedding, the ultimate letting go of what did not serve you this past month. It's a time of reflection. Like, what can you clear out and what can you let go of? And we find in the markets around full moons, there's new lows. Mm-hmm. And it's just fascinating to me as someone who's always used the moon as a tool to either create new goals and reflect or to let go of old energy, whether it's cleaning out my house, detoxing my friends list, blocking an ex-boyfriend, or you know what I mean? Like just letting things go. The markets also reflect that as well. And if we think about it, like how much percent water, between 98 and 72% water, and the moons shift with the tides. And this might be a little intense, but I'm going to say it. Our bodies are fluid mostly, right? And they hold a frequency. They hold frequencies and emotions. There's you can like Google or emotional scale. Different emotions have a different frequency. And let's tie this all back together. So as the moon shifts, our emotional frequencies shift. When the market dips, people's emotions shift and they start to make these emotional decisions. And it's interesting how as the moon changes, we can see it all the way. I mean, I've back tested this for my asset of choice for a long time. You can just see how it works. So I suggest if you're like, oh, what is this? Go on your trading view, find the moon phases and add it to your chart and back test your asset and check it out for yourself.
Yes.
Do you want me to add anything?
No, I think that's good. I mean, I love also looking at them. I would recommend to anybody that's listening that this is piquing your interest to just go on to TradingView and start back testing this, because I think that what's interesting is that people sometimes think that, oh, well, the new moon is a sell signal and the full moon is a buy signal. And it just doesn't work like that. It's not, no. It's not like that. It's really is, really tracking that ebb and flow of the energy. But the way that I sort of observe it is that I can see that as we're coming up to the new moon, like you can see, over the last couple of weeks, even that when Bitcoin was coming into the new moon, it's like pumping into the new moon. And you think this is not, a lot of people, if you watch anything to do with Bitcoin, it's never going to stop. It's only ever going to the moon. And, but because I have an awareness of financial astrology, I know that even we may continue an up move, but I know that there's going to be a bit of a retracement. There's going to be a bit of a pullback. And that upward move is sort of losing a little bit of momentum. So I definitely recommend that if anybody's just piquing someone's interest, that they should go. That's probably the first thing to go back and back test. And it's really interesting. And then the next thing that we sort of look at is the signs and the planets that are transiting those particular signs. So when a transiting planet changes signs, it actually brings with it the energy of that planet, and it also then takes on it adopts the costume of that sign, if that's an easy way to sort of put this. And every sign also is ruled by a particular planet, and when that planet is in that sign, the sign that it rules, it usually brings a moment of peace or a moment of movement. So for example, we've just had a major planetary shift of Pluto moving from Capricorn, moving into Aquarius. So previously, Pluto brings this energy of death, rebirth, of transformation. And so it always holds that energy. But when it was in Capricorn, it was putting on almost the costume of Capricorn, of bringing that that transformational energy to structure, to authority, to power structures. And when it moved into Aquarius, which is all about innovation and technology, it's bringing that energy of transformation and rebirth into and wearing the costume of Aquarius. So I hope that kind of makes sense. I'm actually going to go through the lists of what the different signs mean. It's a little boring to go through the list, but I think it will just give some context for future episodes so that we can kind of understand and relate different movements back. So we start off always with Aries.
I don't think it's boring at all.
You don't think it's boring?
Incredible.
No, I'm so excited.
I'm like, bring it. Tell me everything you know.
So yeah, so we always start with Aries, and so that's really associated with action and, you know, innovation and initiative, you know. So in financial astrology, it can really lead to volatility and, you know, risk taking and those sorts of things. You can expect some serious movement and some volatility with Aries. And then you have Taurus, which is more associated with stability and security. And so again, it's more like Taurus is more safety, stability, and looking at long-term stable profitability. Then we have Gemini, which is really all about communication and information. And so again, it's a time of like volume in the markets. There's a lot of trading happening and a lot of volatility as well. Come back then to Cancer, which is again, you know, within ourselves, Cancer is very much about these deep emotions. And again, Cancer is really related to security. So, and focused on long-term stability. Leo, Corinne's sun sign, is again associated with leadership and power. And there's a lot of focus on growth. It's a really bullish time for the markets. Leo's really bullish. And it's really focused on where can I grow? Where can I move? Where can I grow? And then we have Virgo, which is again associated with analysis, very detailed orientated. So we're really focusing on risk management. There's a lot of risk management focused energy when it comes to Virgo. We then have Libra, which is balance and harmony. And again, more looking at maintaining, where can we find balance and maintain the equilibrium? We then have Scorpio, which is again transformation and intensity, and more of a focus on like high risk, high reward during Scorpio time. Then we have my sun sign, which is Sagittarius, and that's again expansion and growth. So again, very bullish for the markets. And in terms of the contrast with Leo is that Sagittarius is more focused on long-term growth, long-term expansion and long-term growth. And then we have Capricorn.
Whereas us Leos are a little bit more spontaneous.
Exactly. You're like, now, let's grow right now. What can we do right now? Yeah, exactly. And very much also leading the way. Like Leo energy is very much like leadership energy. It's very much leading the way in that time. And then we have Capricorn, which is actually Bitcoin's sun sign. So again, associated with discipline and structure and financial stability, which is interesting because Bitcoin is always seen as such a sort of quote unquote risky asset. But actually, its purpose, its nature is really stability and long-term time horizons. So that's really interesting, and I'm sure we'll dive much deeper into Bitcoin's chart as we go through these episodes. We then have Aquarius with Alex representing our Aquarians, and that's always associated with innovation and disruption. So it's really looking at high tech and disruptive markets. We have Pisces, which is intuition and spirituality. So in these times of Pisces season, it's more about, again, what we were talking about, being led intuitively, even in the realms of your investments and your trading and things like that. and looking at more the intangible value of certain investments. So then we move into the planets, and they all bring their own energy, and they all represent something kind of different in financial astrology. So we'll also include other celestial bodies like the moon and the sun. And the sun really is king, it's really that masculine energy. It's really to do with purpose and self-expression. Again, associated with leadership, power, and authority. So when the sun is in Leo, it's a really bullish time for the financial markets. And then we have the moon, which is really the queen, the feminine, the mother, the nurturer, the receiver, and really associated with the moods. So when we put that in the context of Bitcoin, you have Bitcoin with a Capricorn sun, and so focused on stability, long-term gains, and short-term sacrifices for long-term gains. And then you have this Aries moon, which is very spontaneous, very almost childlike, and impulsive. So it really kind of balances that out. And so you get that, impulsive spontaneity from the Aries moon, but then you have that balance of like, we're in this for the long haul, and let's focus on what we're building rather than just the speculative side of Bitcoin. We then have Mercury, which is really important in terms of financial astrology. It's associated with communication and information, and particularly when Mercury is in retrograde, we will notice this planet, because it can be tied up with a lot of miscommunication. Interestingly enough, Bitcoin is actually more affected in the shadow period before Mercury retrograde, and we'll dive into that in a little bit more detail. But yeah, you can be aware of this planet's energy because it sort of creates some confusion and miscommunication, misunderstandings, and misinterpretation sometimes. And especially when it comes to technology. We then have Venus, which is about love and beauty and pleasure. And that may sound kind of contradictory to financial astrology, but it's really about unifying, bringing together. And when Venus is in its ruling sign of Taurus, the markets are very stable and very profitable. They're in love. They're like this in this little love bubble, and it's nice, very comfortably profitable. And then we have Mars, which is the planet of war, and that's associated with aggression, conflict, and action. So Mars can really drive us to take action. We can see some really strong moves in the market when Mars is moving, especially when it's in its ruling sign of Aries, when the markets can be really volatile, really risky, but very high risk, very high reward during those times. We then have Jupiter, which is all about expansion and abundance and growth. And this is when Jupiter is in Sagittarius, it's really, really bullish for the markets. And there's so many opportunities for growth and for profit and for expansion. So that's what we're looking for during those times and experiencing during those times. We then have Saturn, which is really associated with discipline, structure, limitation, and lessons. So in the context of financial astrology, Saturn really brings the hard lessons. And when it's in its ruling sign of Capricorn, it's a time of, caution and conservative times, but it's also really about learning the lessons. So often for Bitcoin, that kind of means we're under regulatory scrutiny and those sorts of things. And we're really starting to learn our lessons, or we've let different things into the Bitcoin ecosystem that maybe are polluting the ecosystem, and those things are being brought to light and shifted out, and we're kind of learning our lessons to move forward. We have Uranus, which is liberation and awakening, innovation and technology. So it's a really important planet for crypto and tech in general. And then we have Neptune, which is about inspiration, oneness, and it's really about illusion. And so it's tying into the oneness aspect. It's really about releasing the illusion of separation. And then last but not least, we have Pluto, which is all about the shadow, the death, the rebirth, and transformation and evolution. And as I said earlier, we kind of have had a really important Pluto shift. And, it can bring with it some psychological turmoil, some craziness, but overall really positive shift, I think. So, yeah. So, Corinne, did you want to go over the houses and what they mean?
Let's kind of piece it all together now with this last key aspect, which we must look at when we're looking at the financial astrology of the markets. We've gone over the signs, the planets, and now when we put the houses, all of it together is kind of like a puzzle piece to be able to really understand what's going on. So what are the houses? And I feel like this is one that is not as publicly maybe, or how would you say, like people don't look at this as much.
No.
Up there, but they definitely should because
it's really like who it's going to affect, like who that transit will affect, I think is important, or what element it will affect. But it's not talked about as much for sure.
Definitely not, but it's like really key. So traditionally, or let's say in like personal astrology, the houses are used to represent different areas of your life. So you can look at what are the various areas of my life that are going to be influenced by this planet being in this sign and in this house. So the houses are actually divided into 12 sections, and each house is then associated to a particular area of life. Again, personal astrology would be like your relationships, your work, your personal growth, the self, et cetera, et cetera. And astrologers, what they do is that they use the positions of the planets and the houses to understand and interpret the energies and influences that are present during that specific period of time. So we go in, we analyze the birth chart, and this can also help us to gain an insight into various strengths, challenges, potential areas of growth, or the opposite. Now, obviously, here on this podcast, we want to be talking more about the financial markets. So I'm going to go through the 12 houses that there are and talk about from a financial perspective. When we see that, Bitcoin's sun in its natal chart is actually in the 6th house, we can say, oh, okay, so the sun in Capricorn, as Claire said, because Bitcoin is a Capricorn, in the 6th house. The 6th house in financial astrology is about the way that a company does business, or the employees of a company, meaning for us, the way that people have done things in the finances, in economics for so long. And Bitcoin's purpose, because that's his sun, is in its natal chart in the 6th house. Bitcoin's purpose really is to go and change the way that we see and do and experience all of our financial matters in the world. So that's to give an example. Let's go through every one of the houses. So starting with the 1st house. When we look at things in the 1st house, that's really associated with the shareholders. Okay, so again, this could be like the people that are in ownership of that cryptocurrency. The 2nd house, we look at things related to money, trade, economy, and interest rates. So it's funny how, or not so funny, it's kind of like duh for us now, but when, we're expecting something key to happen, on those FOMC meetings, or when Powell needs to speak, sometimes you see a very interesting planet in the second house and you're like, I think I have an idea of what's going to be happening to the interest rates during this time. When it comes to the third house, that's for all means of communication. So the way that maybe that particular project, right? Because we can look at more than just Bitcoin, but maybe that particular project and the people of that project leading that project, come through with a new type of key communication. Fourth house, we're looking at real estate, crops, mines, anything and everything that has to do with the earth, with resources. So, I'm just trying to think of an example. Say, for example, the first Bitcoin transaction has occurred where somebody has bought real estate with Bitcoin, something like that, right? That could happen. Fifth house, here we're looking at educational matters and learning. And this can really be seen during periods of times where I always feel like it's kind of like, hey, are people really understanding this project? Are people in a moment where they realize even that they need to understand more about that project? Or it could even be like, is that project, that crypto, Bitcoin, needing to learn something in order for it to then be able to go to the next level? We've been seeing a lot of that, and there's a lot of that in Bitcoin's natal chart. A lot of important key planets are also in the fifth house. And I love that because Bitcoin really is teaching us all educational matters. It's a new way of doing things. The sixth house we spoke about. So that's the way that a company does business, the employees of a company. So again, this could be like more of like the wider range of people that are associated with that crypto, not even that maybe hold that crypto or investors of that crypto yet, but are getting introduced to it, know about it. The seventh house, we talk about, or we look at the area of exchanges, valuation, for example, of the shares, so the value of that crypto. Accounting. So for example, sometimes when we talk about accounting here in the seventh house, it could be like maybe the methodologies of how that exchange is doing something, or scandals. This one's a really interesting one for some fun exchange scandals that we have seen in the past. Then we have the eighth house. And the eighth house is about waste, death, and rebirth. So this one is very interesting, especially when Pluto, which is the planet of death, rebirth, psychological turmoil, especially I can imagine it being in Mars. Pluto in Mars in the eighth house, I'm like, World War III is probably going to break out if something like that happens, right? To go to the dramatic side of things, right? Then the classic Leo. Then the ninth house. The ninth house is when we look at foreign affairs. So this is interacting with the foreign governments, or it could even be operation in new countries. So say, maybe Bitcoin gets legalized or becomes the legal tender in a new country. We could see that typically in the ninth house. Almost there, fam. In the 10th house, we look at government, politics, senior management, and leadership. This is always so interesting to see. And I feel like we align a lot of the crypto side of things to governments and key leaders, and, even key, call it senior management of particular projects and cryptos and what's going on there. 11th house, which we have been seeing a lot of interesting placements in lately, is in relation to central banks, board of directors, people of authority. And last but not least is the 12th house. And that has everything to do with restructure and repurpose. So another kind of example of not so much a death and a rebirth, I feel like it's less dramatic, but it's definitely like, okay, we're going to restructure, recreate, and some very big changes that may happen within a particular crypto project, business, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the houses. And I'm sure that as I went through them, you can already start to understand, wow, it is really important to know even, where is the full moon happening? Where is the new moon happening? Is some interesting news going to come out? And that's where we can start linking up even the fundamental analysis already with this to understand, oh, okay, like where is it going to be sat? In which house, and what then repercussions are we going to see inside of the financial markets? Typically, there I go and just straight away associate it with emotions. Are people going to act out of fear with this? Or are people going to act out of greed with this? Is this going to cause, an euphoria state of emotion? So houses are really key and definitely not spoken about enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I always find it really interesting to notice the houses as well, especially when it talks about foreign partnerships, or it talks about governments or regulations and things like that. That always is really important and really corresponds well with Bitcoin's natal chart. It really is a clear indication of either what challenges that Bitcoin is facing at that time, or what breakthroughs that Bitcoin is going to have. So it's very, very interesting to observe what houses we're in and how it relates to Bitcoin's natal chart.
Definitely. And I feel like when, we eventually will do an episode talking about Bitcoin's natal chart.
Yeah.
Every time I look at Bitcoin's natal chart, I'm like, whoever Satoshi Nakamoto is, like, he did this on purpose. He or she or they, it, I don't know, whoever they are, right?
Yeah.
Like they knew this. Like, this is so intentional. But we'll get to that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was one of the major confirmations for me as well. And I also am really interested in human design, although I'm not an expert in human design. But even Bitcoin's human design is wild as well. It really just describes exactly what Bitcoin is, what it's here to do. And when you look through the natal chart, it's just when you look back also on Bitcoin's last 14 years, you can see these sort of placements and you just go, wow, this has really played out in that respect. And especially when it aligns with like purpose and Bitcoin's purpose, I think that's really interesting. But I'm sure we'll get into much more detail than we can cover in this episode and future episodes on that for sure.
Definitely. And I feel like, so when this podcast is released and when you're all listening to this, it's going to be a full moon. So happy full moon in
happy full moon.
Libra. So it's going to be a full moon in Libra on the 6th of April, which is really exciting. And I don't know if we specified this. We're using Western astrology because there's lots of different astrology too.
Yeah.
Which means that we should be at local bottoms when it comes to Bitcoin. We've just had the moon move through Virgo. So that means that we will be seeing a little bit of a dip. So as we're recording this, ladies, I'm getting ready for a short right after the moon moves through Leo. It's going to go Leo and then Virgo, and then the full moon in Libra.
Whenever I say just check out the moon, he needs to check out the moon. It's not actually necessarily exactly on that day, on that time that is going to be the local bottoms. Around in that 3-day period, you can see that down move will start to sort of taper off. and you'll notice less volume in the market in that down move. And then as we move out of that, we'll sort of start to gradually move back up towards that new moon.
That's a really key point, because anybody that does start to backtest this and chart this, I always use the daily, the 2-day. So they're like the main 2 time frames that I use. And I do know normally, like, full moon in Libra. So maybe the energy will linger for another 2 days. That's how I normally look at it as well.
Yeah, I'm the same. So what do you guys see? What's coming up? What do you guys feel is coming up?
I was just about to say, there are some wild times coming. So we're definitely, whoever's listening, you're coming in at a really great time to get this information. Oh my God. So the dreaded Mercury retrograde is coming up.
When is that?
Why I say dreaded is because I just think of the memes that go all through Instagram, and everybody's like, oh my God, Mercury retrograde. And I'm like, yeah, mood. It is. So we specifically have full Mercury retrograde from the 1st of May to the 14th of May. And that is happening in Taurus. And the pre-retrograde, the pre-shadow, as Claire said, is really important for Bitcoin. We just see it being a lot more volatile during the pre-shadow of Mercury retrograde, always in Taurus. That actually starts the day after the full moon. So that's going to be tomorrow for our listeners, on the 7th of April. Through obviously until the 1st of May. That's literally all of April. All of April, we're in pre-shadow, Mercury retrograde. Super interesting, because that's also, we're going to be here at the full moon, kind of wrapping up those local bottoms, starting to head up towards the new moon in Aries, which is going to be on the 20th of April. Again, it's going to be during that pre-shadow Mercury retrograde. And what's so interesting about this new moon is that it is an eclipse. We'll talk about what that means in a second. It is at 29 degrees and squared Pluto.
Yeah.
I'm like, what's going to happen?
I know. I can't even imagine.
Okay, so eclipses are new moons or full moons on steroids. They're intense. So expect a lot of volatility. We're either going to go crazy up or crazy down. That it's squared with Pluto, the planet of death and rebirth, and it's at 29 degrees. So astrologically, anything that is at 0 degrees or 29 degrees are just really, really key points, right? Like they intensify things even more. They're really critical points. So I'm not going to say it's definitely going to go up. I'm not going to say it's definitely going to go down. I just know that this is going to be a very, very important point to keep an eye on. And there is going to be a volatility. Should we look at the other planets that's kind of around that?
mean, I also agree with that. I mean, we can put it also in the context of the broader financial system as well. And I love how you said, I'm not saying it's going to go up or it's going to go down, but I would agree that there is going to be some kind of reaction around that time. And I think it is interesting just in the context of what we've been experiencing in the last couple of weeks in the traditional financial system, and the banks and, banks collapsing, bailouts, bailouts happening, or I think they're calling them backstops, but whatever the Fed call this time around. So it's really interesting to just sort of put in the context of how like Bitcoin can react in that way. Like it can either be really spooked and all markets, react in a negative way when these kind of things happen and go more into dollars, or people can start to see Bitcoin as a safe asset. And it's really interesting how that narrative is sort of starting to expand as the traditional financial system sort of discredits itself. Bitcoin isn't changing. Bitcoin is just Bitcoin doing its thing. It's sort of seen as more of a safer asset. And I mean, definitely within the crypto space. So it'll be interesting these next couple of months to see just how these reactions occur. Yeah, I mean, I personally am of the opinion, you guys know, that I don't think it's like smooth sailing for Bitcoin in 2023. That's just my personal opinion. I think it's going to be extremely volatile, both in traditional markets and in Bitcoin. I don't think it's like straight to the moon, or I mean, I know someone has $1 million bet that there's going to be $1 million Bitcoin in 90 days. I think
Let's
he's
talk about that. Let's talk.
yeah. I mean, people are getting very excited about this, but I don't think they've read his thesis of why he thinks that's going to happen. And he literally thinks that, the American dollar will go into hyperinflation, which really means, don't get so excited about it, because $1 million is no longer worth $1 million in that context. So, yeah, it's interesting. He himself has also said that he hopes he's wrong. Like, I think directionally he's probably correct, but I'm hoping his time frame is incorrect, because I don't know that any of us are ready for that kind of chaos and craziness.
Who is this? Who did you say?
His name is Balaji, and he has made a bet. I'm not sure who he's made the bet with, but he's bet $1 million that we'll see $1 million Bitcoin in the next 90 days. Because
From like today?
No, from maybe 10 days ago, I think it was. I'm not sure when he said it. But there's a lot of interviews. His analysis is actually really, really interesting. But I'm kind of hoping I think directionally, he's probably correct at some point. But I'm not sure if 90 days is accurate. What do you feel about it, Corinne?
I feel like I understand his hypothesis and definitely not knocking it. Why I laugh, let's say, is just because one, if everybody's expecting it to go up to the moon, and I do feel like the markets are very greedy right now, then we're going to see the opposite happen, because that's just how the markets are created, right? The financial markets are literally created to do the majority, to do the opposite of what the majority of people are thinking and feeling. The financial markets are literally created to make a majority of people lose, right?
Yeah.
Number two,
capture that liquidity that's created by those moves.
Exactly. And the second thing is, even if we do have this massive crash, let's call it, of the US dollar, and, we were talking about the bank narrative, and if people start freaking out and there's not enough money to go around for people, and people who can't get their cash out, and their bank accounts are gone, et cetera, let's be realistic. Do you think that the world's ready for Bitcoin?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I feel like it's still so at the start. Like, when people are in fear, people still, unfortunately, in my personal opinion, but the reality is that majority of people are just not prepared for Bitcoin. People are not prepared for a cryptocurrency that the government has not said, yes, everybody, let's go and use it. But, oh, wait, Fed now is preparing. NAB, National Australian Bank, has started to create their own digital dollar that's going to be used with Singapore and New Zealand and for all of Australia. Oh, but in India, they're already using a digital bank cryptocurrency, or sorry, a central bank digital currency. CBDCs are not cryptocurrency. We'll do an episode on that.
Can we make that just known
Yeah.
that CBDCs are not cryptocurrency? That's a really important thing because I feel like they're and maybe this is just me or my misperception, but I feel like they're trying to group them together to kind of like change people's perception on it to kind of I just like see this like man leading all these sheep like a that's just the image I got in my head, but like a what?
A shepherd.
A shepherd, yeah. And they're just trying to like but they're extremely different. And it's like they're mimicking what the full potential of this consciousness expansion that's going to change all of society already has started to change the perception of how money works. And I just laugh when the banks do this. But anyway, I digress.
No, I'm so glad that you really highlighted that because that is such an important thing. And that's why I'm like, yeah, we're going to need to do an episode on that thing. But
absolutely.
It's just coming back to, I do not believe that people are prepared for crypto when there is fear and when fear strikes in the markets. Unfortunately, majority of people will run to whatever is being presented to them as the safe option. And let's also look at, I thought this was really interesting, and we've mentioned it a few times. So we talked about Pluto recently shifting into Aquarius, right? And that is really a monumental event because we haven't seen this since 1778, which was a time of revolutions and resetting and restarting. Now,
I just got chills.
Ooh, confirmation. And so Pluto did just move into Aquarius, but soon, right after this eclipse on the 1st of May, it's actually
June.
Oh, sorry. No. On the 5th
You're talking
of May.
about retrograding.
Yeah.
Retrograding.
It's going to go into retrograde on, the 1st of May for 11 days. And then on the 11th of June, it's going to go back into Capricorn until the start of 2024. So I'm like, this is a preview. This is a preview of what's about to come. I definitely want to hear your thoughts on this. I'm just going to add this one thing I read that I was like, hold up. Literally within days of Pluto going into Aquarius, the US Senate brought forth the Restrict Act. Have you heard of this?
Yeah.
No.
Oh my God. AKA, they're trying to eliminate VPN use. And if you use a VPN, you will get charged like $250K.
What? Going off of like of a dark time. So like I said, we're in Kali Yuga now. We're still in it, but we're at the end of it. And so if you guys don't, so I'm
when do we come out of it, Alex? Just asking for a friend.
let me ask my friend.
Friends want to know too.
Let's see. When do we come out of Kali Yuga? So it's been going on for 432,000 years. It will end in the year 428,889 CE.
What?
What? I don't know.
We have a few more lifetimes before we come out of that.
We have a few more lifetimes.
I'm ready to go to Mars. Elon.
So hold on a second. Okay.
Tell me all about Kali Yuga because I don't know this.
So I learned about this in depth in my very first teacher training, which was in 2012. And I almost want to go pull up those notes, not now because they're in my office and don't want to run there now. But basically, like I wanted to build off of like that dark Aquarius of Pluto. So like we are in Kali Yuga now. And if you guys don't know, first off, I'm a yoga philosophy junkie. I literally teach it in teacher trainings. Like other yoga schools hire me to teach philosophy and I love it. But Kali is a goddess, a deity that represents destruction and chaos. So she's not actually bad, but what Kali actually does is she slices men's head off. She beheads men who treat her poorly. And it's just really interesting how we're in this Kali Yuga period, but we also have these really interesting male world leaders. I mean, I'm not implying anything crazy, but I mean, also maybe I am. We have these really interesting world leaders that I don't know, quarrel, hypocrisy, what? But I want to go more into like, when does this end?
Mm.
How long has it been going on? Because somewhere in like my library, I have the ages of the yugas. It's not hard information to find. Um,
Well, I always hold on to the fact that in the Bible it says that eventually there's 1,000 years peace. So I'm
yes.
like,
Yeah.
coming soon. Come on. Some people like when moon, I'm like when peace.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, Pluto.
It's lasted for 432,000 years.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing here. So we are just over 5,000 years into this. So this is Vedic astrology as well. So it's a little bit different. They say in the years of the Devas, Kali Yuga lasts 1,200 years, and on Earth it lasts 432,000 years.
Wow. So yeah.
So we're in it. We're in it right now.
Yeah, and I think we can definitely see that. I mean, even um there's so many things that have happened in the if you think in the last decade, the things that have happened. And I had a really interesting yoga teacher who, has been practicing Kundalini yoga since the 70s. And she basically said that an activation that used to take them like 3-4 hours, we now achieve in between 3 and 30 minutes.
Wow.
So, even though there's a lot of darkness that seems to be, we've got so many wars, there's so many people suffering in the world. There's people that are out that are protesting and, a lot of anger. There's a lot of destruction. There's a lot of darkness that is really in our face, I think, in the world during this time. But really what that darkness has always been there, but it's like through these yogis and prayer warriors that have prayed throughout the decades, is that it's brought that darkness up to the surface. And that's why we're really seeing it. It's really in our face because it's come to the surface for us to be able to release and transmute.
Yes, to alchemize it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Literally to alchemize it, to have podcasts like this. Like I remember, I think I talked to you about this on like another call, but I remember just 8 or 9 years ago, I'm a trauma-informed yoga therapist then, but I remember before I had completed those credentials, even using the word trauma in a yoga class was like, and now it's a buzzword. And now healing is a buzzword. It's all over Instagram. Like we have huge influencers that are posting about this type of stuff, and it's amazing. There is a collective shift, but it's like, well, then why is there so much darkness? But we have to remember that this is a dual universe. Like planet Earth school is a 3D system, and how do we transcend into 5D? It is that process of alchemizing, of talking about this stuff, of using all of our resources, our logic, our intuition, everything that we have been given on tools as Earth to see the bigger picture and ultimately take us inward to our soul.
Yeah.
Ooh, it just started raining.
and beyond to our spirit, because it's so interesting that you bring up this 3D 5D reality, because I think I probably have a different perspective on it than most yogis, or definitely most in the Instagram wellness world, because I sort of see like the 5D is really our spirit being, it's that image, every human being is created in the image and reflection of God, and that's what that 5D part of us is. It's that spirit being. And,
already there.
yeah, exactly. We already are embodying it. It's like, it's our choice whether we want to recognize it or not. And then we have this like 4D reality, which is like our soul, I guess you would call it, which is our mind, our will, and emotions. And that's kind of
choice.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of the battleground. That's where we do the work, right? And then we have this whatever is worked out in that 4D space, you can sort of see is then sort of projected into 3D reality. So it's all at once. It's not like, oh, I'm in 3D, but I'm gonna someone beam me up to 5D. Like, I don't see it like that. I think it's embodiment of it all at once.
Yeah.
Recognition. Obviously when we leave this 3D body, then what will be left is, a spirit. But yeah, it's that it's that space. And I think that's where we're going. And I think, interestingly enough, like a journey down the rabbit hole of Bitcoin has sort of taken me places that I didn't really think, that it really would. Like when you start to look at the the philosophy of Bitcoin, and you start to question some of your own values and those sorts of things. And even just the fact that Bitcoin is a metaphysical entity in itself is that it ties in with what we're talking about as well, right?
You said something so interesting about the 4D. I just want to jump back to that really quick about how it's like the battleground. And it just took me back to the Bhagavad Gita. If you guys don't know, who's listening, the Bhagavad Gita is this like another sacred yogic text. It's stories. It's kind of like the Bible. So it's just really symbolic. It's not factual. It's just symbolic. But the Bhagavad Gita is like, I'm going to sum this up in really layman's terms, is an entire story of the battle of what goes on. And it's symbol of in life. But it's really like it's talking about the battle in our minds of like, what do we choose to believe? Do we choose to believe these like, and stay stuck in the fear and the darkness and keep us in this like more dense 3D, like structured reality? Or do we choose to step into that, like that spirit, that embodiment, that more 5D of who we are as well? And that's, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm like, I feel that. And I feel like a lot of people are starting to feel that. And because I see this massive shift occurring, and just the level of awareness that a lot of people are starting to step into. Like, we just never saw this kind of thing. And to link it back to Bitcoin or to crypto, I'm just like, this is such a perfect move into what we're headed towards, which is that 5D. Because, right, that's like the goal. That's where like we're headed. Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies are literally energy. Like, money's already energy, but Bitcoin, crypto, more than ever, really are energy. Like, we're stepping away from the 3D. We don't have that anymore when it comes to Bitcoin, yet it's still real. It still has value. It still has energy. It still has people's emotions written all through it, their euphoria and their psychological turmoil, and it tests them and exposes them. And maybe we're going through the battleground right now with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's
totally.
so interesting. too how like we don't know the creator of Bitcoin. And sometimes if I let myself think about that too much, I get into some strange places again in the battleground of my mind. But it's like it's almost like a microcosm of the macrocosm. I mean, everything is in its own interesting way, but it's like we don't know who created us or Earth or God. You know what I mean? It's like God. And don't get me wrong, like you guys out there listening, I'm not saying Bitcoin is anything compared to God or whatever. Maybe it is. I don't know. I'm going to be really ubiquitous here, but it's like there's just this faith in it. Like just there's like this faith in humanity, which can be questionable at times. But do you guys see the comparison I'm making?
Yeah,
It's faith unknown.
because I think also what's interesting is that we've is the kind of current one of the like kind of light bulb moments I think I guess with for me with Bitcoin is that we actually our current financial system is also just an idea, and I don't say that like flippantly. Like it's a very powerful idea because basically every person on the planet has chosen to align to it, right? But what the current financial system requires of us is that we trust in the people that are custodians of the financial system and in their processes, in their integrity. And we have to have faith and trust in that system. Whereas Bitcoin actually requires less faith because it's a trustless system and you can actually, you can actually verify. So it's such so it's such an interesting shift. Whereas a lot of people, because we're so used to, and I don't judge it because I also have a lot of trust and faith in this current system, is that I mean it's waning. I'm not gonna lie. But it's like it's just an interesting comparison because like we so easily have trust in what we've known for so long, even though it's questionable, and yet it's really hard for us to trust something that we can actually verify. But I think that's the Aquarian age also that we're in. That's a very like Aquarian idea, to be able to hold those two ideas and for both to be true at the same time, and I think that's where we're at. And that's also where I get that, like, why I say, what, I don't think it's, yay, we've just shifted Pluto into Aquarius, and it's, we've had, top 20 or top 15 banks collapse in America and Credit Suisse collapse in Europe and things like that. So a lot of people think, oh, well, it's just like plain sailing now to the moon with Bitcoin. And I just don't see that as truth, because I don't actually hold this dystopian idea. And maybe it's just because I don't want it to play out like this, but I'm aware of that. But I think that there is this sort of narrative that at some point there's going to be this Armageddon and everything that we possibly know is going to like burn to the ground. And all these Bitcoiners are going to sort of like stand up and be like Will Smith and I Am Legend, but clutching their legend nano. Like, I just don't think that that's how these things play out. I don't think that's how we evolve as humanity. And I actually just don't want that, I don't want to live in that way. So I think this kind of idea of like, the current system is just going to crash and burn and Bitcoin is going to rise from the ashes. I don't agree with that. Right. And so I think we've got some interesting times ahead in terms of Bitcoin, also in terms of our investments in the current financial system. I think gold is going to be really interesting, have a really interesting year as well. And I think it's just a watch and wait and just be really aware. I think there's also different challenges for the dollar too. It's not, I think it's actually a great thing for Bitcoin that it's not the biggest threat to the dollar, to be honest. It's such a small section of the financial system. The whole of crypto is less than $1 trillion market cap. It's minute. It's so irrelevant in terms of the grand scheme of things of the financial system. The dollar has other challenges, and I just think it's, looking at the astrology for this year, it is going to be a really turbulent, volatile time. But I think it's going to be really, really interesting to watch how certain events play out with even the BRICS nations and
Yeah.
China, and all of those sorts of things, they also play into this. So I love the idea of the Bitcoin standard. I can't wait to get there, but I just don't think we're anywhere near there yet. That's my personal opinion. People won't like that, but yeah, that's my sort of thoughts on where we're going. And I think, yeah, as we were saying with Pluto going back into retrograde, I think that's also going to be a time where we do sort of have some power struggles. Bitcoin is going to face, it's all about going back into Capricorn. It's about tradition and authority and these older structures. And I think that we're going to see some, regulation issues and challenges in that respect. But yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think it's really going to be really interesting to see how it plays out this year.
100% agree with you. And just looking more at the shorter term, as of today when we're recording this, but just looking from the 6th of April, the full moon in Libra, I think that we will have reached, local bottoms, maybe lingering for a day or 2 or 3, and then starting to head back up towards the new moon. I believe that there is still this, again, just looking specifically at Bitcoin, just kind of this range between 32K that will probably reach before anything else happens. Obviously, look at your technical analysis, everyone, and line everything up. But then, as we really do hit that 20th of April, which is going to be the next new moon, which is going to be that eclipse, and it being in Mercury retrograde in Taurus, which just so happens to be very, very similar to what happened with the last eclipse, with the one that happened at the start of last year, with the lunar crash, let's say in May of last year. Even there we had an eclipse in Mercury retrograde Taurus. I just see that being really similar, where price will come down. We might even see like a 20, 30, 40%, but nothing is certain. It could completely go up the other way. That's just kind of at a short term what it is that I'm looking at. And last thing that I will kind of touch there too is Mars in Cancer. I think that's really important. Mars has been a very, very long time in Gemini, and Gemini, as Claire said, is really intellectual. Mars is the planet of war and aggression, and so that's why I like to really look at it, especially seeing what's happening in the world. And, we've been seeing things just build up, and that now Mars has shifted into Cancer. Like, I love my Cancers. Cancer's a little emotional. And so I'm like, is it just gonna kind of melt down when it's going through turmoil? That's kind of what I'm seeing there. But let's see what happens. That's kind of just my prediction for now.
We love a good Cancer meltdown. Speaking from someone whose moon is in Cancer.
Oh, my Mercury's in Cancer, so imagine my communication.
I love you. You're a great speaker.
Yeah. Just not when I'm in a not so great mood.
Emotional place.
There we go. But yes, I think that with that, we can wrap up our first episode. So happy full moon.
Yes.
Happy full moon.
Happy full moon, guys.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Bitcoin Zodiac podcast. We hope that our discussions about cryptocurrency, trading, the phases of the moon, and spirituality have inspired you to explore these topics further. As always, DYOR, do your own research. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we will continue to dive deeper and build off of these perception-expanding topics. Remember, whatever your beliefs may be, we all have something to learn from each other. So stay curious, stay open-minded, and keep exploring the world of Bitcoin and astrology. Until next time, these are your hosts signing off. May the stars align in your favor and your Bitcoin investments prosper. Peace and love and Bitcoin. Namaste.